Yeah, so we just wanted to have a very open discussion, actually, about the full emergency response process from small to large and what that looks like, kind of from our perspective, and questions and how it may look from the shipper's perspective. I'm up here getting this going, but I'd like for the shippers that are in the room to kind of MC this more than us a little bit. But I'll give, I think everybody here has already spoken to some degree, so you know who we are. But I'll talk a little bit about how we all work together from my perspective, and then would love to hear from you guys and take some questions. We've got plenty of time here, so. As you guys know, most of our customers use Chemtrec, vast majority, especially in the U.S. And you guys are kind of the first call, sometimes the second call. People call 911, but most of the projects we get, sometimes not always just from an emergency response perspective, but from just project perspective, come through you guys first. And then it either falls to us, depending on our contract with our customer, it either falls to us or back to the shipper to triage that and say, is this worthy? Is it a derailment, but the railroad is going to re-rail it and there's nothing wrong? Is it, we get a lot of forked drums, forked bags by freight company, and they've already cleaned it up. Dow calls those zero-level responses, which I think is fitting from their perspective. But level 1 and then 2, 3, with that being 0. So we get a lot of those, but sometimes it falls to us or to you, well, one or the other, to say, oh, this is bigger than that, and this needs a full boots on the ground response. And then then we can talk about that. You want to talk a little bit about how Chemtrec sees their role in that?
So we start out every call doing a basic assessment of what's going on. We want to make sure that everybody's safe. We want to make sure that we figure out who they are, what they're dealing with, and what they need. Sometimes it's as simple as, let me just figure out how much spilled from a drum, make a shipper notification. And that could be a page out, that could be a phone call, it could just be an email. It kind of runs the gamut. Anything more serious than that, we want to make sure we're giving the right information to the right people. I'm not going to pull a safety data sheet up and give high-level response information to someone that is not equipped to deal with that. Like I keep saying, a grandma in a garage. We get a lot of those. I walked in there, it's my husband's stuff, he's not around, I knocked it over, it's spilled, I want to clean it up, what do? But we'll look at the safety data sheet, and if it's a kitchen gloves and kitty litter affair, sure, pop the garage door open, we can walk you through it. If it's something more serious, we're going to refer them to the fire department. We'll get very basic information about where they are, who they are, say, hey, look, call the fire department, give them our phone number, because we can give them higher level information, and then we'll call our shipper and say, you've had an incident, this is what we're dealing with, here's the phone number if you want to call them back, we'll give you an update as necessary. So, not every call is the same. Everything's a little bit different. Some of them end up with Aaron's folks. Whether they need them or not, we'll send the case over and say, hey, here's what's going on. And then they'll take over and figure out, hey, is a response needed? I keep looking at Brian Bonds here sitting in the middle. I talked to him a lot over the years. I see him smiling. How many times have I woken you up the last, 10 years? But we deal a lot with their porta feeds. So we know their containers. We have a pretty good familiarity with their products because we talk to them all the time. And we're getting calls from their customers. We're getting calls from their delivery specialists, their logistics folks. So there's no one answer that can describe everything that Chemtrec does with a response.
Yeah, and not to pick on Nalco, most of those releases are into secondary containment, so not impacting the environment, Nalco.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's so. And from our perspective, we do get calls before Chemtrec sometimes, and sometimes we'll point back and say, okay, well we can respond, but you also need to call Chemtrec and close that loop.
Yeah.
But also, U.S. Fire Pump may be on site before us, or CTEH may be on site because you've got that facility connection, and the facility's like, well, I have a fire, so I'm calling U.S. Fire Pump, and then the rest of it, it's not transportation related. I'll give Chemtrec a call maybe last, right? So you talk about that process.
Yeah, with a lot of the customers, and out there with it. We're in a lot of the facilities from the standpoint of, okay, I got an issue, or we're working with the fire chiefs or the ES&H teams, or just done hazardous studies inside the facilities, and they may have an incident that starts there. Make the phone call, make the notification. Hey, we got this going on. Probably the biggest thing that I always try to push to the companies is make that call early on. If it's something small, and I know from my standpoint, from CTEH's standpoint, the quicker you can get the resources, even with Aaron, from the standpoint of once you have that, get us involved early on. From my standpoint, a phone call is free. I know that it's a cost of doing business and everything else that when we actually roll out there, but sometimes it's something that can be answered over the phone and, hey, this is going on, or even maybe getting ready to mobilize at that point if you have something going on. It could even be something outside of there, making that call early on to Aaron, if you have a rail car, have transportation, to where we're already advised of what's going on. Once you know, if you know as a shipper or as the manufacturer of the product, and then being able to activate at that point. A lot of times when we're on scene, Chemtrec is later on. Usually Chemtrec's called when it's outside of that facility, because if it's in your facility or if it's in there from that standpoint, you know everything about your product. You know everything going on. So it's not out to the general public. It's more of whenever you are out, your product is outside wherever, on a ship, on a rail, on a truck that's not inside a facility that's controlled, or even in a rail yard type situation. That's where Chemtrec's going to be the first call. And even that standpoint, like you were talking with the fire departments, they make that call. Are they even capable? We talked a lot about this. The fire service from the volunteer side, the municipality side, for responses, they're great. They handle stuff. They're bread and butter of what they do. When you get into the hazmat side, that's why I kind of look at whether it be a fire, it be a wreck, it be anything else there with that. When you start involving chemicals, it's now a hazmat side. That's probably the least amount of confidence that most of these fire departments have, unless they have a large hazmat team and they practice. And even then, what are they practice on? How much do they have? Unless they have, I mean, Corey's facility, your hazmat team's local to what your area, know probably more about the bromide and what you're doing. You take some of the hazmat teams that are down in Houston, in Harris County. That hazmat team's probably, I'd put them up against about anyone. I've worked with most of those guys and done everything with that. Now you go out to BFE, wherever, that, yeah, they're operations, and they may have maybe a technician level, maybe if some guys show the interest with it, but they're not a fully functioning team. Now they're looking to Chemtrec for the information to know how far do they even go inside there, and are they going to even be able to understand how far do I go inside there? I mean, it goes back to the Blue Canaries. It goes back to the fire department. We get there, showed up on scene. I was volunteer career, everything else from that side. We get there, we're there to fix the problem. They made the call to the fire department, and we're sometimes our own worst enemies from the standpoint of getting in there from the fire service, because, hey, I'm going to go throw water on this. Should I or shouldn't I? Did someone make the call? Because that's what they have in their arsenal to be able to do.
Yeah, and I'll just say too, I mean, you talk about getting involved early, getting that call early, and that's even just to kind of take that a step further. That may be, hey, we've got this release into a dike.
Right.
Call you guys before the fire starts, right? Let's come out, let's put some suppression foam on there, and let's get the LEL, in the area to zero, so that the rest of the work can happen. Well, it says U.S. fire pump, but it should say
right.
maybe U.S. fire prevention,
right,
and fighting.
Yeah. Well, and I think Aaron brings a good point. It doesn't even have to be so much as the LEL. It could be a chemical release at that point, and we can look at different ways to put a vaporization control over that to keep it fence level. I mean, we always kind of joke, as long as it doesn't, that chain link fence is great. It keeps everything inside there. But our biggest thing is, you as a customer with your product, if you can keep it inside that chain link fence, then the public has zero everything of what you were actually dealing with. Because once it gets outside of there, that's the hardest thing to put it back in. And it's hemorrhaging to your company from the standpoint of how it's going to be. I mean, we've seen a lot of companies disappear over the years because they've had major incidents. I talked about one that's going to be questionable if that company continues.
And I guess from that perspective too, that kind of release into a dike, whether they call U.S. Fire Pump or URA or Chemtrec, they may call CTEH and say, "Hey, let's see if it's still inside the fence or not." And talk about that.
CTEH is a lot of times brought in once either they have a fear of the possibility of it leaving the fence line or it has left the fence line, turned into a big nightmare for the client. We do come in a lot of times too, when companies don't have a full IH team or a safety team internally, or it's bigger than they can handle, or they want a third party helping drive this and drive their safety as well. But some of the things that we would be doing is, like, for example, a lot of times the product stays inside the fence line. That fence line's great, and a lot of times it can do that, but the vapors, and a lot of times you can't even see the vapors, and the odors, they still leave the fence line. And gathering that data, making sure that we have the right data and the responsible party has the right data to make decisions to protect the community. And a lot of times it might be as simple as perception, and it's a little deeper than perception per se. I'll paint a picture better than I can probably explain it. There is people coming indoors or making phone calls to the mayor or the public offices, or if there's a PIO line set up for this response saying that we smell something, we're getting a headache from it, or I'm going to the ER to make sure I'm safe. And a lot of times these odors are so below an action level, the odor threshold, that people just fear the unknown. They smell something, they wonder if they're being exposed in a negative fashion or in a harmful fashion. But we collect that data. We provide it immediately into the incident command or the whatever setup that the company has, so they can drive those decisions to make sure that it's the right things are done. We provide toxicology support where a toxicologist will be on site, guiding the process to interpreting the data, helping to make decisions. Should we go ahead and pull the trigger, even though the action levels at this point, because this community's got a lot, there's a retirement center or a nursing home down the street, or there's a school here. Out of abundance of caution, should we go ahead and do the right thing so that we don't get a black eye in the media or whatever could come of that? Also, we help drive PPE decisions, which every company represented on this stage does that, but we can help using the data collected from air monitoring, sampling, environmental, to drive PPE decisions. If the project starts and everybody's having to be in level A or level B, we can take data and help drive the decisions down, or even in some of the other processes that we know that there's a time limit of 15 minutes that they can work. This shouldn't take more than 7 or 8 minutes. We can work from a higher action level that's still safe within the confines of the decision making, but help people work in a more comfortable and efficient way by not being bogged down where their peripheral vision's blocked from the respiratory protection, or they're wearing such thick suits and things like that they don't have much ergonomic ability to solve this problem easily. Outside of that, we do a lot of different things, including delineating. If the product you can't see but you can smell it, or it's soaked into the dirt's dry now, and you can't see it there, it didn't stain the dirt or you can't see it through grass and things, we can help delineate, taking samples to determine the work to get to the end product of fixing this and everybody getting back to normal life.
Yeah, and I think we talk, URAY, talk a lot about how CTEH fits in with some of the projects or potential projects we may have, bringing you guys out early and saying, if we're doing something complicated or something hazardous, getting you guys out. We did it for an HF project. We did it with some other projects. Like, come out and review what we're doing, right? Like, you guys bring a wealth of knowledge around specific chemicals and industrial hygiene that is hard to replicate. But I'll also say, around those chemical plants, we talk a lot about, litigious people and things like that. Oh, yeah. It's not always that, though. Like, if you're talking about something in Beaumont, like, the people in that community may work in that plant and they may know what, okay, well, styrene, we'll pick on styrene. It's got a parts per billion odor threshold, and the TWA on it is I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's much higher than that. And they may know that I just need peace of mind that that when I've laid my head down that you guys are, yeah, okay, I can smell it, but it's not, 300 parts per million, because that you can't really tell the difference with your nose. You just know it's in the air.
I'll use a great quick example, try to make this 30 seconds. A couple of years ago, there was a trucking company that called us out through a law firm, asked us to come help in New Jersey. Is a product that was proprietary from a company in Texas that was being shipped, and the cooling mechanism on their tanker truck failed, so it was started to create a thermic event and overheated. The manway popped, and there were odor complaints up to 6 counties away in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. 6 counties. There was not even so much as a parts per billion detection of the methyl mercaptan or the H2S that was off-gassing from a degradation product of heat. There wasn't even a parts per billion detection when both action levels are in the parts per million range off of the TA travel stop that the truck was parked in the back and shut down to cordon this off from the community. But while there were no detections anywhere close to an action level, it made the area stink up to 6 counties away. I believe at the end of that project, there were over 100,000 phone calls asking if they were in harm's way. We had toxicologists doing town hall meetings in at least 2 counties a day for like 2 straight weeks, and we were sharing the data. We were even bringing air monitoring instruments and samples showing how we do things, and breaking this down with some folks with PhDs that work with me that are much smarter than I am, but they were able to ease a lot of people's minds. And I've seen some dangerous town hall meetings, and I've also seen some that went well. And out of all the town hall meetings that I was at during that period, because we were able to provide quality data, we could show them how these chemicals work, and we were in there mingling with everybody and not acting like we're trying to hide anything. The communities were bought into everything. Everything went great from there. But again, some of this is getting the message out quickly, and that's part of what all of us as a team do.
Yeah, and I just say, kind of round this out before we take it to the group, is how does Chemtrec plays a role in that a lot of times, right? Mm-hmm. Community knowledge, community right to know, I guess, maybe not specifically from an EPA perspective, but when there are those events and there are those phone calls, and there is that community concern, can you talk a little bit about how Chemtrec manages that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we get calls on anything that's major. Our phone number is all over the place. It's on the side of the rail car. It's on the outside of the facility. It's on safety data sheets. So if there's something major going on, I mean, we probably fit a lot of calls in that incident just because somebody looked up a data sheet, or they just searched for hazmat response or emergency, or they had an ERG lying around. They saw the phone number in the back. So we'll try and get those folks in contact with the people who can give them the right information. We'll give them the name of the company and the phone number. There have been instances where there have been special hotlines set up around some of the major incidents for community members to call and ask these sorts of questions, so they can be reassured that, hey, look, this is being handled. There's nothing to worry about, and having a live person on the phone really helps calm people down. If you call a phone number and you just get menu after menu after menu, that doesn't really calm anybody down. They're like, well, I'm just stuck in this loop of computer voices. I'm never going to get anything. But we answer with a live person for every single phone call, and even just that helps to calm people down. And we teach our people how to de-escalate situations, because we have people that call that are hot. They are mad. They are like, there's this rail car and it's parked behind my house, and there is something coming out of the bottom, and you got to do something about this right now. And they can't tell you the railroad. And of course, it doesn't say who the chemical manufacturer is on the outside. So we figure that out. We tell them, like, look, we're going to make sure that somebody's taking care of this for you. They might not call you back, but rest assured, we'll get someone to deal with this. So stay away from it. Don't go over there, because they do. They'll want to go over, well, should I do something? Please don't. Don't go start turning valves, because they will. Yeah, I mean, people want to help. Some people are desperate to help. I get that. No, go inside the house. We'll take care of it. So we want to make sure that we're protecting everybody that's associated with the chemical industry, with the transportation industry, protecting first responders. So, that's what we keep in mind whenever we're handling these things, these phone calls. Like, what does this person need to know? What can we do to keep them safe? And what can we do so the chemical industry can be good partners and good members of communities and handle this and help?
Yeah. Yeah, like we talked about. Was it you talked about earlier this week about, or somebody, not having the, no more does it say Exxon Mobil on the side of the rail
Yep.
cars? Yeah, yeah, those days are past. But so all those calls go to the big yellow placard on there that say Chemtrec call for emergency, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I'd like to take this opportunity to open it up. If you guys have some direct questions or comments or things we want to kind of work through as a group, Lance.
Wow.
Honestly, fewer than you'd expect on that one. And I'm not quite sure why.
We got the calls.
Yeah, there you go.
We're still there.
Yeah.
One of the things that these guys at Chemtrec do really well, and CTEH has helped them. We've helped OURAY and many other companies, even some of the companies that are in here. In addition to safety of the workers and the community, communication is just as important. And I want to put an emphasis on, if you don't, like I said in my presentation earlier in the week, if you don't get the message out, the media is happy to get the message out for you, and it's not going to be the one you wanted. And a lot of times it's very inaccurate. But one of the things that CTEH has done for East Palestine, we got over 1 million phone calls. We set up a hotline the EPA tasked us with. We had PhD toxicologists. We had PhD epidemiologists. We had medical doctors that worked for our staff, occupational health nurses, all answering these phone calls. And instead of just, let me get your information, we'll have somebody call you back, or you're sitting waiting with hold music, somebody was answering those calls at all times. And we were able to provide information working with Norfolk Southern, working with the EPA and the local reps and everybody. We were able to get that message out to the residents that were concerned, the business owners that were concerned. We got phone calls from people in California that were just curious and wondering, I heard that Fukushima's radiating us still from Japan and we're going to die from cancer. Is this stuff blowing our way too? And I mean, literally, we had some crazy conspiracy calls, and then some were just probably people wanting to get information for the news. But we work with the companies to design, not to bias a message any direction, but to make sure that we are able to create transparency, but not paint anybody in the corner by not having the right information to give.
One of the things, just to champion what's going on there, we always, when we get out there initially on an incident, and I know Aaron, and with what we're doing here with that, pushing CTEH to get them in there early on, they bring that other side, exactly what you're saying with about controlling that. You as a chemical supplier, quicker you have an incident, the quicker you can control that out there is going to change what's going to happen. The other side, you look at it from the legality side after this incident, is what CTEH can do is limit that liability that you're going to have out there, and being able to circumvent that and not turn into a lawsuit, because I mean, you're going to have lawyers show up right when that incident starts trying to put together a class action. The more data that they pull together, and we've worked with them very closely to be able to do, hey, you guys got to get in here. You need to start getting air monitoring out there. One, it's safer for everyone in the general area and from us. I mean, we've used them to help identify PPE for what we're doing inside there. That way it makes it easier on these long-term incidents to get them controlled back. You as a chemical supplier, same thing what you're using for Chemtrec, but when inside your facility, that's a big thing. Being able to hold this back in and take it away from the general public.
And that coordination is super important, right? Across everybody that's involved in this. At Chemtrec, we get calls and we don't know who the shipper is. They can't tell us. Shipping papers are burned up. They're not available. They find a drum somewhere. So we might not be able to identify whose product it is, but we know what the commodity is. And we'll reach out to basic producers and say, look, I know this isn't yours, but we've got guys out there. They need to know what's going on. Are you willing to help? And 99.99% of the time, the answer is yes. They say, you know what, put them on the line. I'll help them out. And we have mutual aid programs that are great, but most of the stuff falls outside of mutual aid. So the more that we can all help each other to make sure that communities are safe and we're responding appropriately, the better off we'll all be. An
important question that a recent response that both Ron and I were on, y'all may still be helping with in Louisiana, made national news. It drives some questions that I've been getting phone calls about or in meetings, and I want to bring something else up just for longevity of your and safety and just continuity of business should something dangerous happen at your facility, guys. I literally got a phone call from a client on Monday this week in Kentucky that said, "Hey, I got a question for you." I said, "Okay." Said, "I just asked the company that I trust to make sure that if we have a bad day to what they would do in the event we do catch fire. Just curious on what the process would be." And they said they're going to stand back and watch it burn. It's dangerous. And guys, some of these facilities that I've had phone calls the past couple months from out of curiosity asking that question, it's got me asking questions to my clients, asking them, have you ever thought about that or asked that question? You have ERP guidelines at any of these standalone facilities that are required that are supposed to be reviewed every 5 years, but it may not tell you exactly what their process is going to be. If you catch fire and have a bad day, are they going to stand back and watch it burn and then try to pick up the pieces afterwards? Because if that's the case and there's somebody else that will fight the fire, you might need a bigger ally group. And that's where these guys come into play. It doesn't mean that everything's going to be a fire that can be put out by because if it's all hell broke loose and the whole place is up in flames before you get a phone call, by the time you get there, it may already be completely burned down. But to have a better chance of continuity of business and saving some of your assets, you need to ask that question to your customers. It doesn't mean your customers aren't, your companies aren't doing a good job. A lot of times those companies are the best at what they do, but this might be outside of their realm of expertise based on the chemicals you're dealing with, and that's where you need Ryan and his team.
Right. And that's probably the thing that I cringe the most whenever I always hear, oh, we're just going to stand back and let it burn. There are ways to handle most situations. It may not be the most ideal, but standing back and letting it burn, because what's going into the community, what's going to do from that company. If you stand back, if your plan is to let it burn and not act upon it, that company's probably not going to be there afterwards.
Yep.
Because you're going to get so much of an impact there with it, or it turns and becomes federalized. And if you haven't ever dealt with a federalized job, bang your head against the table, because it's not easy to get a hold from there. They're looking at what they can do and how to get it done. Those federalized jobs, that becomes a super fun site. It's going to be there for a very long time for getting the cleanup there with it. So yeah, reach out to people or get plans in there. If you don't like it, I think the biggest thing I always push most companies is have multiple resources there with it. Have options. Plan for that worst day scenario with it. What are you going to do? Who's going to be the call list for that? Because once it exceeds your scope of what you can do internally with whether it's your ERT teams, I know dealing with Shell, we have contracts with Shell. I know Aaron has contracts with Shell and everything going up there with that. They have plans for that. Now you start looking at some of these smaller companies. They may not have that, and kind of back to your comment that, well, we're just going to back off and let it burn. Well, that's not really an option, because what's going to do to your business? How much is going to affect at that point? How many other releases are going to happen based on, okay, it's not just going to stay contained in one area. That was one of the things early on, and I don't see what's the name from Amsty. I don't see him sitting here, so I can hammer on this one from ITC. The initial early on ITC was let it burn. Well, that went from 1 tank to 2 tank to 12 tanks that were burning. That was getting ready to go to spheres, to bullets, and getting ready to be a lot worse. And it was impacting a nitrogen line that was feeding all the rest of the plant. So if they'd have let that burn, let it continue to go, that was going to shut down all of Deer Park and potentially send these other chemical plants that are in close proximity into critical situation when they lost their nitrogen feeds.
Yeah, and I think most of the people in this room and most of our collective customers who we have under contract because they take emergency response seriously, right? From our perspective, we very rarely work for people that haven't contacted us, the year before, and we've started the contract process that takes 18 months and all that stuff. But I do challenge, maybe everybody in this room's got really good emergency response plans. I would almost put money on it, but where are those triggers? Like we're all expensive, right? Like we're not going to sit up here and pretend we're the, VSP's the expensive gaskets. We're the, we're the service side of that, maybe, hopefully. But where is that trigger? Like at some point, it's the quicker you call CTEH and get them out there, they can start setting up air monitoring, making sure that they got that data. The quicker they call you, the smaller that fire is going to be, or it won't be there at all. And those are important. Those triggers are important, and can mean you may spend a small amount of money more often, but you limit that catastrophic event where you've lost an entire facility that we've been out on, right?
I think to go on what Aaron's saying, I mean, yeah, it's expensive to do emergency response. It's like buying insurance. We're all sitting up here potentially for buying insurance. When you actually do that claim and everything with that, that's when it gets expensive based on the type of insurance that you're going to have.
Or stock price hit.
Stock price, yeah. So, but the other side of it is you get what you pay for. Fast and cheap is not always good. And I guess the thing is that if you want fast and cheap, be willing to deal with that other side of it. If you want it done right, there's a cost going with it. I mean, it's not like you don't go out and buy a Kia expecting it to function like a Mercedes. So that's probably the easiest thing. I mean, y'all build, for the chemical manufacturers in here, y'all build some high dollar chemicals, make some high dollar chemicals, send those out there with that. So taking the secondary side of not doing the, bringing in someone equal to what you're doing and expecting a different outcome from it is always the hard side of that. I mean, it's what is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome.
And it's about having enough of the right information early on is also part of the process, because 24-hour news cycle, they want to come in, they see a cloud or whatever, a plume, and they want to have all the answers. Right? We may not have all the answers. We may not have 60% of the answers in the first 24 hours, but they want 100% of the answers in the first 40 minutes. So it is difficult, and it's about, I guess, in the responsible party, if you or the facility owner or the railroad getting up and saying, these are the facts as we know it, and being as transparent as possible, but without, again, like you said earlier, painting yourself into a corner. Yeah, and or you have instrumentation setting off an alarm that, right? I don't know about your facility, but you have instrumentation in the gate that sets off an alarm, and everybody hears it. Everybody knows at the same time, and that may be corporate, right? And you're finding out at the same time they're finding out, and they're expecting you to have that information.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. You bring up a good point, and you can sit here and pre-plan, roundtable, doing those mock drills, even if it's just tabletop scenario. Burn your plant down or burn your facility down or burn that down on the table there. There's so much information that comes out. We do a lot of tabletop scenarios, whether they're actually drills or just a tabletop. You can sit there and burn your facility down nine ways, and then go back and look at where were the shortcomings there with us, and maybe hadn't thought about what the plan is for communication, what the plan is for that came from other incidents. That gives you so much more information to be able to go forward. So now you have a better plan moving forward when you actually have the incident. Maybe it doesn't go to the catastrophic, but you handle it earlier on because, hey, we thought about this. We thought that these 14 things are going to happen. I'm looking at plan triple Z at this point because we thought about this in a tabletop scenario.
And then what will that company survive, right? Stress test the business business continuity. If we lose a plant, do we survive? If we lose a plant, yeah, we can survive, but what if we affect the surrounding community? Does the business survive and everybody's jobs within it? You know, do the people inside survive physically? And what could be even worse is an uncontrolled on switch, right? That could be much worse than everything shutting down.
We've been out on standby on 2 major refineries because of power outages, where they had to crash a plant and were waiting for a potential release. One actually had a HF alky unit that we were watching very closely because they lost the main trunk line power and had 0 power inside the plant. The other one was from an ice storm and shut them down. We actually had the flares back up in the knockout drums where they had straight product going into the flares because all the units had dumped. So they were sitting on a time bomb that was going to happen very quickly.
Good question. If we're in level A or level B outside the fence line, usually that's already been evacuated. But I have been in a scenario, the biggest vinyl chloride train derailment before East Palestine, and I think by quantity it's still the biggest ever in the United States, was in Paulsboro, New Jersey in 2012. And I recall at 2 o'clock in the morning, myself and one other were outside of the evacuation area taking readings, and we learned that the vapors from where the tanks were leaking were going into the underground sewer or water drains and coming out a couple miles away at levels that were above what us workers would have to put SCBA on for. So myself and my coworkers putting on our respirators and hightailing it out of there. And I went and woke up the mayor at 2:30 in the morning and said, we've got a problem. And, but in that scenario, I had somebody looking at me like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? You know, and he thought I was an alien or something is what he said. But I told him that out of abundance of caution, I'm doing this. But the thing that I found is 9 times out of 10, and obviously you need to know your demographic, because if you're at a rail yard and you know a lot of the neighborhoods next to a rail yard are low income, HUD, Section 8 housing, and there are also a lot of them in a lot of areas are known to be dangerous. People get robbed if they come out at night, or just not a good place to be. I mean, heck, the United States period, the whole world, it's dangerous at night in a lot of places that didn't used to be when I was a kid. But communication and being transparent. And I've found more often than if I'm talking to a resident or somebody that's concerned, they come knock on my window in my car, or I'm standing outside of my car taking a reading before I get back in and go to the next spot. I've found that treat them with kindness and compassion, just like you'd want to be treated, and show them what you're doing. Show them your instrumentation. Explain in simple terms what this is. And you can even show them the screen and say, hey, look, so right now, the oxygen's normal, 20.9%. You can look that up, and they'll pull it up on their phone to see what ambient oxygen levels are on Earth. And they say, okay, you see there's no LEL. That would tell us if there was a potential for something catching fire. There, as far as these other components, depending on what sensors you've got in there, and showing them what you're seeing and explaining to them what that means. And you don't have to get all science nerdy on it or anything. Just give them show them, and don't give them a reason to think you're hiding something from them, because that right there, I promise you, will create a confrontation. And if it doesn't create a confrontation with you and that person, it's going to create a bigger confrontation, because they're going to go call a lawyer, they're going to call EPA, they'll get 7 on their side, you know, and on the news that night, and
You'll end up on TikTok.
Yeah.
And all this kind of stuff, you know, and it turns into a nightmare. But and it also, I recognize that it doesn't create just a hostile situation for myself if I'm the one showing it. But if I don't treat that with kindness and compassion, it's going to create a problem for everybody out there working. And they may not know it, but they need to watch their backs now, because I was stupid enough to just treat this as a non-event and then treat these folks like I don't have time for them. Don't ever do that to people if you're in that situation. If you treat them with kindness and compassion, just like they're a family member or somebody a friend, you're going to get a lot further. You're going to build some trust in the community that's already shaken up right now and stirred, because we weren't in their community yesterday. We're not supposed to be in their community. We've already given them a headache because an accident happened, and they're looking at it like we're inconveniencing their lifestyle, and we might be putting them in harm's way and hiding it from them. Let's give them the right message and try to build their trust in us while we're there. It'll keep all of our lives more safe through the process as well.
Yeah, you guys have the unenviable job of having to go into the community, right? We might be dealing with boiling tanks of chemical and spraying foam and all that stuff, and you're out driving in your SUVs through the neighborhoods with monitors zip tied to the luggage racks and things like that. And I'd much rather be in our position than yours in that case.
And in some areas that we go in, if they're dangerous, we've been told by the police, local police, that you're not going in this area after dark without us going with you. And literally, they'll turn on their lights and get in front of us and behind us and guide us from spot to spot to take readings, and have someone from the police sitting in our car as a protection factor. I've been in East St. Louis, Illinois, which at one time that was considered the most dangerous area in the United States. And I'll never forget going through that community and seeing some unfortunate events roll out and seeing guns pulled and aimed towards the cops that were escorting me. And that's not where I want to be when Jesus comes back. But I've seen some stuff. But by the end of that response, we were able to at least, they didn't recognize us as the enemy. They recognized us as trying to help them. And we aren't there to cause them a problem or stir something up. We're there to make sure that they're safe. And there were several residents that told us that they didn't think anybody would care about them. If they died is how they thought the perception was from the rail yards and the other chemical producers around there. And that wasn't the case. And they didn't know that, but they found that out during that response.
Anything else from the audience?
I want to paint one quick picture. This is super important, or I wouldn't bring this up. I want to make sure any of you that ever get put in the position that y'all are in the part of the ER team or a safety team, and you're collecting information, you're collecting data with air monitoring equipment, I'm going to tell you what people see in court, the holes that get poked in the data in court, and the moments that I get told, I wish we'd have called you guys out, we will call you off going forward, is somebody went out, they collected a reading, and this reading was above an action level. They documented the reading and the location. They didn't document anything that was going on around it. And then they leave, and they never come back and take a second reading at that spot, or it may be the next day before they take another reading at that spot. If this isn't litigation, guys, you just painted a picture that these folks were above an action level in harm's way in this area for more than 24 hours, or possibly forever if you never go back and take another reading there. I've heard the term from several people today, close the loop, and this week, close the loop. A lot of us hear that phrase a lot. In air monitoring, you need to close the loop. You need to take that reading, document it, obviously communicate it up so your company or the company that you're working for can get the right things happening to mitigate those vapors, or get people out of harm's way if it's a timely thing that's going to last a little while. And then you need to be there until the reading drops down to either below action level or zero. So you can document that it lasted for this long. And then you also need to document what was done to protect folks. Or if there was an anomaly going on, like you're taking a reading next to somebody's exhaust pipe and you didn't document that, guys, you just documented a high reading that it might have been right next to your exhaust or somebody else's, and you didn't close the loop on, and you didn't say that it was from that. There's a lot of truth in not having enough data. You need to take notes on those types of things.
Well, your false positives. Hey, you talk about that in there, that you can take and get an action level reading that may be a false positive and be able to go back and justify what that false positive was, that you didn't technically have a release at that point.
Yep. That's every bit as important, guys. And at CTEH, we always bring extra equipment. If we ever get a detection with a piece of equipment, when we get a detection, we always use a second piece of equipment of a different technology, but it will get that same thing. And if we can't duplicate that's there with both instruments, we're going to do a deeper investigation to make sure that this was a false positive. But we're not going to document this as being a real high-level reading until we've confirmed that this is real with multiple instruments. That's to protect the client. That's to protect the community from having an outrage or a fear factor moment that was a non-event, that was just an accidental piece of equipment giving me the wrong data. We always duplicate our efforts, and we always confirm our efforts. That was a great topic. Ron, thank you for that, because that is super important.
We actually ran into that up in Missouri on the lithium thing. We actually got a false positive of ammonia. We were out there, nothing in this plant and where they were doing the battery recycling, we were getting ammonia odor. And then we actually went and got the Draeger. Actually, y'all had them with you at CTEH. We actually pulled the Draeger tubes and got 150 parts per million on a Draeger tube.
Yep.
Now, but we're not doing this in fresh air because we just had an odor. That would have been enough to put someone in full respiratory distress at that point. So we actually had to go back to figure out what was happening, why we were getting an odor, why we were getting false positives on a Draeger tube, but it wasn't realistic on what's actually happening for the product that was happening up there.
Yeah, and I'd say, I mean, just to kind of round back to, is there's no wrong way to start, there's no right way, I guess, depending on the situation. Every situation is different. So there's no 100% right way every time to initiate a response or to start that response. Because as we said, if it's a facility and it's a gas release with no fear of fire, then CTEH is probably getting called first, or we may get called first. If it's outside the gate, then that's likely coming to Chemtrec first. So if it's a smaller incident, then it's probably going to Chemtrec first, or maybe sometimes coming to us first. Sometimes it becomes a routine request. Maybe somebody calls us for a valve replacement, and that's a scheduled thing a lot of times because we got to get the valve and all that. And then all of a sudden it turns into an emergency. Mm-hmm. And then we're many times, if we know our customers well and we know their processes, we're saying, okay, well, we're on our way, but to close that loop, need to call Chemtrec, report that so that it goes through the proper channels and everybody knows what's going on. So, every single incident that we manage is different than the last one, different chemistries, different locations, different needs. So there, I think the idea around this conference was to bring everybody together so that we know each other now and not at 3 a.m. and that's including the people in the audience here, and so that we can all have that relationship so that I know I'm going to call Ryan or Ryan's going to call me or whatever the case may be to get whatever you may have handled as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Guys, I've seen situations where a company called us out. I'll use the agri industry real quick. There was a pesticide, herbicide fire a few years ago on the East Coast, and they called us out against several people in their higher ups, better judgment, or they didn't want us to be called out. They said, let's try to put this fire out and fix this ourselves. We don't need a company like CTEH out here. The HSE took it upon himself to call us out there, and after the project wrapped up, and this was like an 8 or 9 month project. This was a big deal. It caused business issues with multiple businesses around. There were big evacuations. There was people's property damage and things like that from the fire. It was a big issue, but according to the regulatory agencies, they were going to get a fine that was like $8 million for all that had happened. But because, and it wasn't just CTEH, there was several other companies that they called quickly and got out there, but they said because they had the air data, They communicated it appropriately to the regulatory agencies. They had the right crews out there addressing the remediation in a timely manner. They were filling it. They had a proper ICS structure. They ended up only getting fined $120,000 instead of $8 million. And that's just because they were recognized as doing everything they could by their judgment and having a good plan and enacting it. I promise you the higher ups that thought it wasn't a good idea to call everybody, they try to handle it in-house. Their tunes have changed, and they've been singing the gospel of everybody up here that was involved going forward, and they know that they're going to call out of abundance of caution before they don't call us at all in the future.
And we talked a little bit about it not being the cheap solution, the people that are on this stage, but it really is. If you just let it burn or you just let it vent, and with complete disregard for the environment and the community, that's a much more expensive option. It just, it's 3 years if you're lucky of litigation, and it's fines, and all comes back to you. Luckily, the people in this group, they do it right the first time, so that's good. Somebody else I think had a no. All right, you guys good? Mm-hmm. I appreciate you guys coming up and doing this. And yeah, no, this is a really good event. I appreciate everybody coming out. This is a QR code for feedback. If we could get your honest feedback, it's anonymous, so we can make the next one even better. This is every other year, and I'll plug for Chemtrec here as well. We kind of unofficially hop them. So they're next fall, and we'll be the following fall, and they'll be the next fall after that. So I hope to see you guys at the Chemtrec event in Nashville. Nashville next fall. They've already got the date and location, and
heck yeah,
yeah, should be fun.
Thanks, Aaron. I mean, it's a great chance to come here and network with everyone, and what you put on for being able to do this and bring the collaboration together of all the entities, because you have such a great cross section of what's going on here, from manufacturers to chemical suppliers to transportation, emergency response. I think it brings the network together, and it really shows how it can work well together, and being able to handle something for an incident later on. And I think that's the biggest thing is knowing there's options there for that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, we are, as a group, very passionate about what we do, and I do, for some reason, like this business. So,
we're cursed. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. Cursed with the love of our job.
Absolutely.
Just happens to be very difficult.
I hope everybody in here, I'd assume that there's a lot of faces in here I've known for years. So I assume that we all either make enough money that we can't, we're probably unhireable in any other type of work because this place has corrupted us, or we all love our jobs. But I know a lot of you personally in here, and I know for a fact that y'all are passionate about what you do, even though it's a lot of work and a lot of hours and it's a labor of love. But and seeing that this week, and also getting the opportunity, I have a certain niche that I work in. I've been doing this for 16 years, but to get to sit and learn from some of you and learn the parts and the components that you guys do and better understand it, it helps me be better at my job, because I understand more what's going on the things that my hands aren't touching, but I'm monitoring, or that I'm trying to drive decisions to create a safer area while they're working, get the vapors out, bring them into less PPE safely so they can work better and more comfortably. I mean, this stuff's invaluable to me, and I thank all of y'all for not just up here on stage, but the conversations as well.
Yeah, it's been extremely valuable to talk to everybody and see what you're up to, what you're doing, what's changed in the business the last couple of years, and how we can all work better together.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.